Hello and welcome back to the Financial Success Show. As always, wow, Jordy LaForge just sitting across from me instead of Captain Kirk today. What an idiot! You got to switch.
What are you talking about?
You got to switch the camera to look at this idiot.
Hey, I tried to rock the sunglasses last week. That wasn't a hit.
Oh
so
no,
maybe
you know
this
what?
one will
Not
be
Jordy
be a
LaForge.
hit.
Lady Gaga. That's who you look like. Anyhow, welcome back to the Financial Success Show. As always, I am your host, Jeff Eady, the president here at Blackthorn Group. And joining me is Lady Gaga, also known as Captain Kirk Forsyth.
Nice.
Our client relations manager. Say hi, Kirk.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Mom.
Even she wouldn't acknowledge you today.
Yeah, probably not.
So today I'm very pleased. I have one of my closest friends, somebody who's not only been a friend to me, but also a mentor and a great supporter over the years. Also known as one of Toronto's preeminent pre-construction condo experts. I believe his tagline is Google my name.
And I actually did Google his name, and he was the first person that came up.
Oh,
so.
I'm not surprised because it's not like it's Jack Smith.
No.
So I'd like to welcome to the show my good friend Todor Yordanov. Todor, how are you today, buddy?
Very good. Hello, everybody. Good to be with you guys.
It's good to see you, my friend. It's good to see you, especially in the daylight. I don't see you in daylight hours very often. We're usually after hours.
It's a beautiful day out here.
So, Todor, for the folks that are watching, pre-construction condo is your forte and has been for, what, 4 or 5 years now?
Yes.
Also, you and I teamed up on a meetup group that you started about 5 years ago, Real Estate Network Toronto. You want to tell folks a little bit about your history? I mean, you're an immigrant from Bulgaria originally. Definitely didn't start out in the real estate game, but you've risen to the top very quickly. Do you want to kind of give the Coles Notes version of how you came to be where you're at now?
Yeah, I have to make this story much shorter, but I've always been interested in real estate. I've always had this fascination with real estate. My great-grandfather was a very successful lawyer back in my country, and he had a big real estate portfolio that he lost when the communists came to power. It was all taken away from him. So when I immigrated to Canada, I was often fantasized, wouldn't it be nice if I can do something similar to that, even on a smaller scale. So yeah, real estate was always my passion. And I read all of the books, joined a lot of clubs. Later on, bought my first property in Toronto about 24 years ago now.
Wow.
Started with that, did some renovations, split it into 2 units, had 2 tenants. Managed tenants, had tenants move in, move out, had the tenant from hell.
Oh, we're going to get into that in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Almost completely wiped me out. Discouraged me quite a bit. After that experience, I sold that property. And I didn't really get back into real estate for another 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
But then, as the internet was developing, more and more networking clubs were coming up as well. Joined Real Estate Investment Network, learned a lot more, like had this support group around me of people that were doing similar things. And we were, learning and buying and, kind of growing at, different paces, but under the same umbrella of that networking club. That was a definitely great time, and bought a bunch of properties. Did really well with some, not so well with others. Tried everything. Tried single family homes. Tried Hamilton. Tried student rentals in St. Catharines, and I had a full-time job at the time, and I was also running a full-time renovations and property management company. And sorry.
Well, he's a busy man.
Sorry, 1 second. Let me just put this
That's
on.
the marimba ringtone, if I'm not mistaken.
Now it's on
Airplane mode. Awesome.
There you go.
we are flying high today, brother.
mode.
And not quite.
Then I got my real estate license, and I started bringing people to St. Catharines from Toronto to expose them to what the student rental properties were offering at the time, and still are in St. Catharines. It's a great market. So we bought a bunch of student rental properties, bought them, sold them a few years later. People made a lot of money from that, and eventually I wanted to bring business back to the city, so I don't have to commute to St. Catharines all the time. Got a little tired from that commute, and and found condos. Strangely enough,
And just kind of fell into the pre-con, or
all
how'd that
into the
work?
pre-construction condos. I met a guy at a trade show who was kind of sitting alone, almost in a corner, you can imagine, trying to attract people to pre-construction. What actually attracted me to go and talk to him is he had a sign, mortgages for student rentals. And at that time, I was like heavily into student rentals, and student rentals were getting harder and harder to finance. So I said, let me go and talk to this guy and find out about what he has in terms of financing student rentals. And his main business was pre-construction, and I'm always curious. Like I'm just a curious person, so I always ask them, it's like what they do and how they do it and things like that, looking for new opportunities. And he invited me to a pre-construction meeting, and I went to that meeting and never looked back after that. Like I sold pretty much all my properties in Hamilton and St. Catharines and moved everything to pre-construction developments in Toronto, and started selling those and promoting those. And that was about 5 years ago almost. We have some projects that people have already exited, so they bought with me, waited for 3 or 4 years for those projects to be built, and we took occupancy. We have a whole bunch of units in the summer, rented them out. Like, people made incredible money. So that really, that was my promise to them, and I'm very, very happy that it turned out that way.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. I have to say, I didn't really understand the pre-construction market as well as I do now until, of course, I met you. But even after that, until you actually came and did a meetup for us here, and you started talking about the exit strategies and which points you can get out and what kind of return you can make at those points. It's pretty cool that email that you sent out, I guess about a year ago now, when you sent out that email that was the hand-drawn with that. That was a great email. Also, something we have in common is that Todor is a massive fan of Dean Jackson.
Oh, no way.
And has actually, you just finished a course with Dean, did you not?
I've been working with Dean Jackson this year pretty much since January.
That's
Right?
awesome.
So everything that he does and all of the workshops that he has, and I've been following him up and then going to all of his events and then courses this year. It's
And
Jackson year for me.
he's a brilliant marketer. I can definitely say you were just on his show recently as well.
Correct.
More cheese, less whiskers. But I can say that the interview that I had with Dean changed the way that we do our marketing here.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for switching the camera, Fabian.
Got caught.
One job.
Got caught.
Yeah, you don't get to lip off, Fabian. You just
Spit it out there, Junior.
no. I can say that Dean Jackson's marketing system has totally changed the way that we do everything around here. How has that changed what you do, Todor?
I learn, and I'm constantly learning from him a lot. What I really, really like about him and his philosophy on business is shading off. It's really focusing on what your core strength is. Find that out, and then hire other people to do the rest. And the
Amen.
fact that he's really, what he taught me and what he does himself. Like he has those moments when he would sit by himself, completely undisturbed, and he would just write. and he would
Hatching
look
his
at,
evil
and
schemes.
he would look at the client experience from 3 points of view. The interaction with the client and the transaction. He says, like, what if another person was sitting and looking that conversation between me and you? What would that person see? So he would look at it from, my perspective. Obviously, I'm in a condo sale, so I want to tell you about the condo project and how great it is and what it's going to do to you. But then there's another angle. It's like, what are you seeing and what are you learning and what your desire is? And also a third person, if you add a third person into the equation, what are they seeing about our conversation? So he would look at all these angles, and then we'll really, really focus on that client experience and client outcome. His system is really designed on, it's built, I guess one of the foundations is the client outcome, because if you don't have a positive client outcome, then you can't have the referral system. It's not a system that you can repeat, and it's not a system that you can sustain over a long period of time. So it's really
Yeah.
being focused on the end goal, delivering.
It's brilliant. Have you written a book yet?
For me,
Yeah.
I have.
And are you using that?
I have. My book is just a collection of stories from clients that I had over the years, and what they've done in real estate, and what.
Tell us the title. Come on, the title is
The
great.
title is Real Estate. It's not for you.
Such a great title. Such a great title.
I got a question here for you, Todor. You touched on student rentals, and that kind of triggered my memory because I have a buddy of mine who bought student rentals down in St. Catharines as well. And he did really, really well with it. But I had a former personal training client of mine that bought into student housing as well down in St. Catharines and was struggling and ended up having to sell the property. How do you make student rentals work?
Kurt, you've been on this show now for 10 weeks, and that's the first good question you've asked. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks, buddy. Wow, I actually got a compliment from Jeff.
Sorry, Todor, didn't mean to stop you there. I want to tell, reward him with a snack.
Yeah? Where's my treat?
No problem. So, how do you make a student rental successful, and how do you make pretty much any rental place successful, especially in a market where you have a potential for a lot of undesirable tenants? It's simple. You start with the best property that you can buy. The property attracts the tenants, and if you have a property that is not desirable and it's not in the best part of town, guess who you're going to attract? And
Yeah.
The undesirable from the
Yeah, exactly.
I often say it either spirals down or it spirals up. It never stays the same. If you have a beautiful property in a beautiful part of the city, and then you can attract those great tenants, and you treat them really well, then this business is going to just flourish. It's going to spiral up. But if you a lot of people from Toronto make that mistake when they go to markets like Hamilton and St. Catharines, and the prices are cheaper there, and then naturally when you see something cheaper, our next question is, can I find something even cheaper than cheaper?
Yeah.
Okay, I found a great deal, but is that the best deal? Can I find a better deal? And now if the price is the deciding factor, now you're looking, instead of buying something for, let's say, $300,000, you're starting to think about what if I can find something similar for $250,000? What about $200,000? What about 180? And those properties do exist. So you're starting going down that path on price alone, without considering the quality of the product, the quality of the neighborhood, and the quality of the tenants that you're going to attract. Because like, you have to understand that once it is the property that attracts the tenant. There's nothing you can do to attract a much better tenant if you have a subpar property.
That makes sense. That's Gary Hibbert says beautiful homes in beautiful neighborhoods. That's their focus. Now, you have a great model.
And that's exactly what I mean, and he's 100% correct.
And yeah, he's done very well with that model. Now, you have a motto that I'm a big fan of. Do you want to share that with us? Location, location.
Oh, location, location, transportation, and waterfront. And that is for, you know, how they say location, location, location in real estate. And in Toronto, it's location, location, transportation, and waterfront. So it's 4 items: location, location, transportation, and waterfront. And I believe that if you get 2 of those 4 correct, you're going to do very, very well in either one combination. 2 of those 4, you're going to do really, really well in Toronto and GTA.
Yeah, that's I think that's absolutely a brilliant motto for what's going on, especially since we have an underutilized waterfront. You, the part of town you live in, the Park Lawn Lakeshore area there, is really sprouted up over the last few years, and that was traditionally a very seedy area. I remember when I worked in the film industry, that was like the no-tell motels were down there, and now it's one of the nicest parts of Toronto. No, it was.
No-tell motels.
Terrible motels.
Absolutely beautiful, amazing out here. It's mostly developed. I would say probably 80% of the available land and anything that you can build around here, it's already developed. It's a great community, great parks, beaches, waterfront. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I had dinner with you a couple of weeks ago down there, and just to be able to go for a walk down there and see the waterfront, and it absolutely is beautiful, and it's amazing what they've done, simply because it had the waterfront. Because, I mean, transportation down there isn't great to get downtown.
We don't have, we have a 24/7 streetcar.
Yeah, but
and then possibly a GO station very in the near future.
Now, the GO station, I would say, is good, but come on, the streetcar out there is tough.
I've used it once. It works.
You, sir, just got told, Jeff.
It works. I've used it once. It's adequate.
Anyways, Todor, myself have talked to a couple of real estate agents, a couple of real estate brokers, and I've done some reading. Some people say the market is up and they're reporting a lot of sales. Other people are saying that the market's crashing, it's crashing hard. What side do you fall on? Do you believe it's falling apart, or do you believe that it's rising?
I have the answer to that, but I have to look for my crystal ball.
How is the pre-construction condo market doing? And how is the pre-construction condo market doing? How about that?
Yeah, we'll go with that one.
Look.
It's not very good.
let me tell you something. The whole world wants to come to Toronto. Mm-hmm. The whole world likes Canada. There's many factors that go into the whether real estate prices and real estate excitement for pre-construction buyers is going to be up or down or flat in a given year. You have world politics, you have geopolitical factors, you have the Canadian dollar, and then you have the local government, and then you have, there's just like so many factors. Right now, the excitement, I would say, for buying pre-construction condos is not as high as it was last year or the years before that. More and more people are kind of sitting in the sidelines and watching all these projects come up, and they're not in a rush to jump in. Again, for many factors, the prices have gone up significantly in the last 12 months. We were selling pre-construction projects anywhere between $750 to $950 a square foot a year ago, and now prices in downtown core are $1,100 a square foot, 12, 13. Some are going into $1,500 and $1,600 a square foot. So it's a significant price. Like you could have bought, let's say, a one-bedroom condo for $350,000, $400,000 a year ago, and now you're looking at $550,000, $600,000. So it's a significant jump. So a lot of people are like, "Oh wow, what's going on here? Let me just assess the situation and feel the situation. And but at the same time, all these projects are selling,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've heard some of the news that some of the projects were canceled, and they were canceled for a different reason. They were not canceled because they didn't sell. They were canceled for different reasons that I may not want to go into right now. Mostly inexperienced developers.
Mm-hmm.
But the big boys, as they call them, like the big developers that have been around for 50, 60, 80, 90 years and have built like tens of thousands of units, they're doing really, really well, and they know what they're doing, and their projects are attractive, and they sell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's no slowdown on what we're seeing for construction coming up. I mean, I subscribe to a million different um, email updates from different condos, and they're coming out every day. I get your emails on a regular basis, and there's no shortage of them coming up. I think it's just that people are a little more cautious right now because they have seen a very quick rise.
Oh yeah.
Now, just to edify a little bit of what Todor is doing, Todor, do you mind if I tell about the building you had?
Sure.
Todor, one of the bigger developers in Toronto, and certainly one of the bigger names in developers over the last couple of years has been Brad Lamb.
Don't go into details.
I'm not going into details, but Todor, had a shot. He had a whole building.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and that's the level that he's at.
Wow.
That's I think that's important to tell people that Todor knows his stuff. He knows the condo market inside and out. And what I find really interesting about that is that you're really only 5 years into pre-construction as a realtor, and how you came about all the knowledge. You sought it out yourself, but it was really networking and networking events, right?
Not only networking events, it's just my sense of curiosity again. I guess like I see an opportunity and I want to know everything about that opportunity, and I look at it from many different angles, and I don't necessarily believe all of the hype. I'm curious and suspicious at the same time. Like I really want to know the people that are behind the project, and if somebody tells me like, oh, this is great, and then we've been doing this. I really want to see their track record, and I really want to see if everything in that story checks out. And that is, if that is true, that I'm like really excited, and I go like, okay, I think that there is an opportunity here for me. There's an opportunity here for a client. There's an opportunity here for somebody else. If there's nothing for me, at least I can refer to somebody else. It's all sharing.
Yeah.
And learn.
I love that I plug you live in a great neighborhood and all we hear is sirens.
I know. You stole my joke. I was going to say that.
It's like you're living in my neighborhood, Todor. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I used to.
Yeah, you did. He did live in Cabbage Town. So how important do you think the clubs have been to getting you to where you're at now? Like RAIN and of course Real Estate Network Toronto.
Incredibly.
Yeah.
The network that I belong to, and the club that I started, and you helped me grow incredibly, because this is the place where I've learned a lot through sharing. Mm-hmm. So if I have something to share, that knowledge that I pass on to somebody else usually comes back threefold, or like whatever, tenfold. People want to share back, and then I share something that may be useful to someone, and they would share something that is useful to me, and it's all about sharing. It's all about looking for those opportunities and also creating those opportunities. But it's also you have to be in the game. Like that's what I always tell people. Like you have to be in the game. When you look at Toronto and the real estate market and what's being said in any of those real estate clubs, like you go to any real estate clubs and everybody's going to tell you like, buy this, buy that, buy now, don't wait. and then most people start to think about it, take a step back and saying like, let me go to another club. Let me go to another meeting. You have to be in the market. Like you have to play in this market. You have to really dip your toes and or go full in. There's very simple rules that you have to follow when it comes to real estate, and the rest is easy. It's like as long as you have some cash flow that can cover your monthly expenses, and it will allow you to keep that property for a longer period of time, you're going to be okay. You asked me about the market. I don't know what the market is going to be next year. Nobody knows. Seriously, like nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows
Yeah.
what's going to happen with any of those big levers that control the market. We don't. Is today better than last year? In some respects it is. In some respects it's not. Is it better that we bought last year? Of course it's better if we bought last year. But if we buy something today and look at it 10 years from now, we're going to look like a geniuses.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You look at people who bought their homes in Toronto back in the 70s and 80s, and they, bought them for $30,000, $40,000. Now they're worth $800,000 to $900,000. They look like geniuses too, but back then 30 was probably expensive.
That's true.
It's going to take a bit of a left turn here. You mentioned something that I think a lot of people are going to find very interesting, the tenant from hell. Can you explain a little bit about that? Or
Didn't we hear a story from Gary also?
Yes, we
Tenant
did.
as well?
Yes, we did. Well, you know what? I think a lot of times this is what people are really afraid
Yeah.
of. I think a lot of times people are stopped from investing because of their fears. Mm-hmm. And, we've talked to several people over the last year who have money just sitting there, but they're afraid because they don't understand it. They've heard the horror stories. Can you talk a little bit about your tenant from hell and how you dealt with it? That's a no.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to.
I just need to frame it properly so the focus doesn't really go into the tenant from hell, because the tenant is or not the ideal tenant is part of business. Like no business has only good days. Every business has bad days, and when you have a tenant that takes you a step back, is just the cost of doing business. That's the way I look at it now. Is it pleasant? No. Is it difficult? Of course it is. Are you going to lose some sleep and you're going to lose some money? Of course, absolutely. Is it going to take a lot of time to get them out of your property, renovate, paint, clean up, do whatever you need to do, and then stress over the next tenant so that is not repeated? Yeah, you're going to go through that. And that's the thing with real estate investing. Like a lot of times it's sold as, passive income, getting rich and making all that money. And it's not. It's work like anything else. Like there's work that goes into it. There's a certain risk and reward. So.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
Fire truck.
Yeah. What is going on in your neighborhood? Sounds like they're in your hallway. No, that's all good. I love how focused you are and undistracted by the fact that your building might be burning down and you're still doing the interview.
Could you imagine?
I thank you for that, T.
I have the lake down just below my balcony, so I can just jump in the lake. I'll be.
I don't know what floor you're on, but tuck up, man.
Well, here's another question for you. In today's market, in the condo world and in the single-family home world, should people be looking to sell their homes, or should they be sitting on their homes for a couple more years?
The answer to that question is going to be revealed by their next step.
Ooh, good answer.
Oh, that is a good answer.
Good answer.
I'm intrigued.
I was expecting it depends, but good answer.
Well, yeah, it depends. It depends. What do you want to do next?
Well, let's say they're looking at buying another home.
If you want to sell now and you want to go down to a beach and have the sun, for 12 months, and do it now. Why delay for another year?
Well, I can definitely say that selling a home here in Toronto, and then with my good friend Tim down in Costa Rica, Buying homes down there, it's considerably cheaper than what you would get here.
You were telling me the numbers the other day.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like you can sell $1 million house, single family home here, and buy a fairly similar home with a heck of an ocean view for less than half the price. It's kind of crazy. Depending, you've got to leave this market to get that, but it's really interesting.
Like if you're changing markets, then it's then it's like a one decision, right? You're going from one market to a completely different market. Then do it now if that excites you, and then you can't wait to get to your next destination. Do it now. But if you're staying in the same market, it doesn't really matter. When the price go up, also you're gonna sell higher, but then you're gonna buy something higher. So at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. If you have a next step that you are waiting and you want to get to, do it.
What's the next step for you?
Next step for me is I'm growing my brokerage. I'm looking at more and more, possible pre-construction projects that I can help people with. And I'm also looking at Montreal. Montreal is a very, very interesting market right now.
I actually have a question on my piece of paper about Montreal.
No, you did your homework, Junior.
I did do my homework. There was an article I read, and it said that people are starting to flock to Montreal. How come? In your opinion?
Price points, and also their real estate market started to move. For many years, Montreal market has been depressed, and then there was no appreciation or very little appreciation, and now we're starting to see some significant waves. Like every year, properties get more and more expensive. A lot of developers are moving to Montreal. A lot of cranes from Toronto are moving to Montreal. And they have their local developments, but we have also big Ontario Canadian developers that are going and building buildings in Montreal. It's a market that is just starting to grow the way I suppose Toronto started to grow some 20, 25 years ago.
That's interesting that you say that, because I have a lot of good friends that live in Montreal, and I went there about 3 years ago when the whole separatist movement resurged, and the Pasta Police and Paulin Marois and all that. And driving through downtown Montreal, there was tons of buildings boarded up, tons of shops, all that stuff. And I said, you know what? Montreal looks like Hamilton 10 years ago.
Right.
It does.
And now we're starting to see that there is definitely a cycle to it. Like it's a boom and bust.
Absolutely, there is a cycle. And that was revealed to me in a really, really big way. Like this summer, we went to I spent a couple of days in Rome, like a week in Rome.
Oh, that's gotta be tough.
And one thing I didn't know about Rome is because we were going around, and I had a friend who was giving us a little tour of the city, and I just realized that all these buildings that you see in Rome, most of them were built in the 1820s, 30s, and 40s. So in about 30 to 40 years span, most of these buildings were like Rome was built in 20, 30 years. And I'm not talking about the historic.
We know it wasn't built in a day.
I'm not talking about and the Colosseum and all that. Obviously, that's much, much, much older. But the type of the modern buildings where people live were all built in about 20 or 30 years span, and that's just a cycle. You see, we have a cycle in Toronto. Toronto's going to be built in 20, 30 years, and then the cranes are going to move on to another city. They'll be there for another 20, 30 years. And then we'll move on and move on, and that's how I guess it's like a wave. It just travels.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how the different developments happen and how different cities pop up.
Yeah.
You and I have had lengthy conversations with George Ross from the Trump Organization. What kind of information did you glean from him getting to talk with a guy who's been in real estate that long?
Well, I briefly touched on this, but I remember from our lunch, he said many things. He says most people don't realize that I have other clients than Donald Trump, and a lot of my other clients are, much wealthier than Donald Trump, and they are, huge with huge portfolios. And buildings and thousands of apartments or what have you. And he says some people are very smart and very aggressive, and I've seen them fail just because they buy on too much, they leverage themselves too much. And he says you have to realize. And remember, this guy is, well, how old was he back when we met him? About 80.
86, I believe he was.
Right. So he's probably like 90 years old now,
Yeah.
more or less, right? A very sharp guy, incredibly sharp, and he's been a real estate lawyer his entire life. So you can imagine he's seen many cycles, and he says the people that do really really well, and he says you have to realize that real estate is cyclical game, and you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared to withstand the downturn. So bottom line is don't over leverage yourself. When you can buy easy and you can finance those properties easy and the interest rate is low, like don't over leverage yourself, because 5, 6, 10 years down the road, prices may drop, interest rate may go up, rents may drop. Are you going to be able to hold on to these properties in an environment like that? If the answer is yes, then yeah, you're going to be in good hands. But don't think of yourself as the smartest man in the room, because the market does what the market does.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally out of your control. I think one of the things that I learned from him the most, well, two things really. One is wherever the jobs are, that's where people are going to want to live. So that's a good market at any time. And the other one that I really like is it's easier to borrow $100 million than it is to borrow $1 million, because if you're borrowing $1 million, you can get a second job at McDonald's and eventually pay that off. If you borrow $100 million, you've got no chance of ever paying that off. So just go for it. You either make it work or you go bankrupt.
Interesting way of thinking, but hey, there's some truth to that.
Well, I mean, a guy at that level that says something like that makes sense to me.
It does, yeah.
I mean, George, when George started out, he started out with $75,000. That was his first investment.
Wow.
Yeah, and now I have no idea what he's worth, but...
Second option is not an option for me.
Well, exactly. And that's the thing. You borrow that much money, you got no choice but to make it work.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're toast. But it's some pretty powerful stuff to sit down with people like that. You got any questions?
I've got lots of questions here, Jeff.
Oh, wow. Look at you, doing your job finally.
I know,
Good
right?
boy.
I want to talk a little bit about the B20 rule and the stress test that was brought in. In your opinion, did that work or did that fail?
I don't think it worked. I think it just stopped the market unnecessarily. I think it had it wasn't executed well. It wasn't planned well. I'll give you an example. This foreign tax investment, they what people don't realize, that the foreign buyer doesn't exist. We've talked to developers that sell 10, 15, 20,000 condos in a year, and you ask them how many of those condos are actually bought by foreigners, and they'll tell you 4, 5, 6. That's about it. Mm-hmm. This is how many foreign buyers you have in the city of Toronto. Now, that's not to say that foreign money is not buying condos. You see? But the government decided to buy, to tax somebody who doesn't exist, which is the foreign buyer.
I see.
Foreign money flows through, cousins and friends and Canadian corporations, and foreign money buys Canadian real estate, but they decided to tax the foreign buyer that pretty much doesn't exist. But everybody was thinking, it's like, oh, now, now they're going to stop buying our real estate, and it's going to drop in price, and it's going to be affordable for us. Same thing happened to me when I brought Toronto buyers to St. Catharines to buy student rentals. Up until I started bringing clients to St. Catharines, it was all the local boys in St. Catharines. They were buying them, and they were profiting from them, and it was a great little gain for them, until I started bringing investors from Toronto, and everybody, like, they didn't really like me much at that time, and they says like, we can't wait for you foreigners to go back home, so our prices will go down again, and the same thing is happening in Toronto, right? We can't wait for the foreigners to stop buying Canadian real estate, which will never happen. Prices
That's,
will just keep on going up.
oh, absolutely.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and you know, you've said it yourself. We are, on the whole, still undervalued when we compare ourselves to other major markets. Paris, London, Manhattan, we're still very undervalued.
Oh yeah.
And I don't understand why it stayed that way for so long. I'm going to blame Mel Lastman. I don't know. But it is amazing to see the city's, upsurge in the last few years. Something that has come up recently that I'd love to, and if you don't want to weigh in on an opinion with this, I totally understand, but the Treb versus Oria ruling, where they are now publishing sale prices on MLS. How do you feel about that? And how do you feel about Treb's reluctance to publish those prices?
I really don't have anything to add to that conversation. I'm not that involved in the resale market, and it doesn't affect me in the pre-construction market. But I believe that the more information consumers have, the more educated they are, and then a lot of real estate agents, traditionally, we keep all of the information, and we are the gatekeepers of information, and that's why people come to us, because we have the information, and then they wanted to keep it that way. And to me, that is the lazy way of being a real estate agent. If the service that you can provide is only some numbers like sales data, then I don't see this as a service. I see this as, it's not a service, getting information from people. So as long as people can find that information, make those education choices, and then go to a real estate agents for a real advice, tell me how to look at this versus that. What does that mean? What do you think about that? Like, what is your opinion? What is your expertise? Then you can really guide people into making better choices that are based on their first reading on the information that flows freely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm a big fan of putting out your best stuff for free, and people will pay for the details. And I think Dean Jackson really talks about that too in his marketing systems. But
I got time for one more question here.
Yeah,
No, you don't.
Like,
Yeah, I do.
Just finish up on that point. Like, it changes. Like, the industry is changing, right? It's changing all the time with technology and with more and more information available. And going back to Dean Jackson, we all have to sit back and really focus on and dial in and really be very clear on what is it exactly the service that I provide. How do I make somebody else's life better? Why would they want to meet with me? And once they meet with me, how would their life and decisions are going to be changed for the better? And that's what I do, right? That's what every I think real estate agents should ask themselves and speak from that perspective.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on that. And since Junior is about to cry if I don't let him ask this question, go
Well,
ahead.
I'm just looking at the time right now, and I know we gotta let him go soon.
Just go. Just do it.
Let's go for it.
All right, it's my favorite part of the show.
Oh,
It's my game. I love it. Jeff's rolling his eyes at me. 2 truths and a lie. Let's hear it.
I'm sorry?
so am I.
Oh, let's play the game 2 truths and a lie. Have you heard of it before?
No.
So you have to tell us 2 truths and 1 lie, and me and Jeff have to guess which one is the lie.
About me?
About you.
Oh boy. You are catching me unprepared.
I am. It's what I do best.
Um,
See, this is why I hate.
Oh, it's a good game. All right. We're gonna skip over the game.
yeah, I can't. Sorry.
See, you stump people with this every time. You
Hey,
just throw them off, and
maybe it's because I'm a
this is supposed to be
millennial.
a good
That's
experience
why.
for them.
That's
This
a
is
great
what-
experience. He's having a fun time.
No, that's not fun for people. That's fun for you. Stop ruining it.
I am having fun.
Anyhow, Todor, you know, I love to give props where props are due, and I definitely want to say that throughout my journey over the last few years, you've been a major reason why I've been able to have success in my life, and I thank you for that. You've been a really good friend and a really good supporter, so thank you so much for that along the way.
Welcome, and likewise, thank you.
You're a hell of a guy, and I'm not going to get any more emotional than that. I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, thank you, and you're one of the people I value most in this world. Do you want to leave us or leave our viewers with any parting thoughts of wisdom, or just yell at Junior for being Junior?
Well, I want people just to realize something that I've been talking about over the last 3-4 years. It's not pleasant to hear, and I'm not saying this, and I don't feel any satisfaction of saying this, but it needs to be said. More and more people are going to be going into a position where they cannot afford to buy, and they will be renting for life, and that is not what a typical Canadian was brought up to believe or was brought up to think. We live in Canada, beautiful country, and everybody here over the last generations, if you work hard and if you work on yourself and if you explore opportunities, eventually everybody can get a home and get a house and can build a life in that home. And that's becoming harder and harder, especially in GTA. 3-4 years ago, when I started speaking about that, I says, look at European towns like Paris and London and other big places around the world where young kids go for a beer after work, and the real estate conversation just doesn't exist. In GTA, we all talk about real estate. What are you buying? What are you renting? And how much is this? How much? They don't talk about real estate. Why? Because real estate is just out of their reach, period. It's a game over. And that's starting to be a reality for more and more people in Toronto. So I want people to start thinking about that. We had about 50-50 ratio of renters versus owners in Toronto. Now that ratio is going up and up and up in favor of, less buyers and more renters. And I speak to a lot of people, and everybody's saying, I don't think I'll ever be able to afford to buy. And I'm like, yeah, if you don't do something now, next 6 months, next year is going to be even harder. So I want people to really, really look at that as a wake-up call and say, I got to do something about this, and I have to start with something. Start with something, right? If you look at someone like myself, for example, if you know the first property that I bought, and the reason I bought it in a power of sale. And why was power of sale? Because nobody wanted to touch it. It was garbage. It really was garbage. But I bought it, cleaned it up, renovated it, divided it into 2 units. Yes, it took a lot of work. It took some money that I borrowed from my credit cards, but I got in. So everybody.
So you borrowed money from your credit card for a down payment?
Down payment and renovations, yes.
That's cool. I wish we had more time to talk about that.
Well, we'll have to have him back on the show.
So yeah, do something, get in, and you're gonna be glad that you did 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Todor. Actually, just one last point that I'm going to make, because he was talking about rentals in Toronto and condos. We hear a lot from the more liberal-minded folks that we need more rentals in Toronto, stop building condos, yada. Well, what do you think the condos end up becoming?
I totally agree.
Well, but a lot of those condos end up becoming rentals, do they not?
They do, but they become very, very expensive rental units. And I think that the city needs to start creating, look, builders will build whatever you tell them and whatever you allow them to build. Builders want to
Fair
build,
enough.
right? They'll find a way to make money. So you don't worry about that, but you need to guide them of what you actually need them to build, and they'll build it.
Yeah.
That's what they do. Right?
That makes sense.
But we had a chief of city planning who now is running to be a mayor, and she was concerned and focused on creating bicycle lanes for the last 10 years, or 7 years or 8 years, right? So the housing situation was never looked at seriously, and with the amount of focus and intention and importance that it needed. And that's why we're in this situation now where people don't have affordable rental units. We need to create an opportunity for those builders to build those buildings with rental units, and we need the infrastructure. We don't need to tear up the Gardiner. Again, this mayoral debate right now is going to be about, like, are we tearing up the Gardiner or not? We just went through a major renovation of this Gardiner that costed us like so much money, and we're now talking about tearing it down. And
At the same time, the lakeshore was under construction.
and nobody is talking about all of these, young people that need a place to live and get a start.
Yeah.
And it's very, very important.
No, I agree with that. The city runs on its service jobs, and to have a service job nowadays and live downtown is darn near impossible. Most people are commuting in from Markham, Scarborough, any place like that to work at a job where they're making minimum wage, and that's just it's not a viable lifestyle. The city will collapse if those folks can't figure out a way to live within the GTA.
Yep.
So anyhow, on that doom and gloom note,
Wow, great way to end the show, Jeff, with that one.
keep it to yourself, Kirk. Todor, thank you very much for joining us today. You are a wealth of knowledge, an incredible human being, and a good friend. And if you don't know who Todor is, Google his name.
I promise you it'll be the first one that comes up. I did it.
We really appreciate you having taking the time out of your schedule, my friend. I know how busy you are. Kirk, any parting words?
Nope, just because I know for a fact if I do, you're going to come back at me with something, so
Wow, you're learning to keep your mouth shut. Good for you.
I'm good.
Speak when spoken to.
Go buy real estate.
Go buy real estate.
yeah. If I can afford it.
That's amazing, absolutely. So, as always, thank you for joining us today. You can go to paylesstaxbook.com, download a free copy of our Payless Tax book. Of course, I have to plug Todor's book, Real Estate, It's Not For You. Check that out. And you can come see us live. We actually have an event coming up a week from Saturday, October 13th. We have some incredibly dynamic speakers coming out. Of course, our CEO, Craig Dunkerley. He is, how do I describe Craig?
It's so very, very hard to describe Craig.
He is one of the smartest people I know. He forces me to think far outside of what I understand to be my limits. Put that back up there. Put that back up there, Fabian. Don't take that away yet. And of course, we have Dragon's Den winner and CEO of Dig It Apparel, Claudia Harvey. And our new partner in our mortgage brokerage, broker Jonathan Tilger, is going to be coming out to speak about mortgages, the B20 rule, what's going on in the lending market. Todor also knows Jonathan. It is a small real estate community. I'm very excited about that day. It's a full day of learning about taxes, about how to pay less tax, how to get better rates on your mortgages, better conditions, how to become an entrepreneur, mindset, all of those things. It's a very tiring day.
Oh, it is.
And but it's a very, very great day. You learn a ton of stuff. I always like to go back to the first day that I saw you sitting at that Financial Success Summit. You look like a kid in a candy store.
I was a kid in a
You
candy
were
store.
so cute back then. What happened? And then, of course, Of course, next week we have our guest, Amanda Russell. She's a legal field representative and a networker extraordinaire, not just network marketing, but she runs Weekend Network and several networking groups around the city. We have a ton of stuff we get to learn from her. I'm very excited, very positive lady. Again, I'll say thank you, Todor, for joining us. Captain Kirk,
Thanks, guys.
I don't know what to thank you for, but thank you. And thank you for joining us today. We always appreciate your time. And that is us for the week, the Financial Success Show. Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Awkward.
Thanks, Todor. Have a
Take
great
care.
day.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I'm Jeff.
I'm Kirk.
You got that one right.
I
Good for
did.
you.
No, thank you.
Click the link below. Beside. It's
It's
over
right
there.
here. Right here. Click this link.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Watch us live on Facebook. And go to paylesstaxbook.com. Subscribe, and we will get you notifications of all of our shows.
Oh, yeah.
The goal that they may not be.